Mr. ISTVÁN CSABAI from the ELTE, the Eötvös Loránd University from Budapest. He's professor of physics and also member of the Hungarian Academy of Sciences. István, I hope you are with us, and feel free to start your speech. The stage is yours.
Okay, I hope that everyone hears me. Is it okay? I hope that there will be no network disturbances. So as Bence said, I am a professor of physics, which means that I teach at the university and I do research. So my talk will be not about business applications, rather about the relation of sciences and big data and machine learning and intelligence in general. So let me start at the very beginning, at the historical ages, like in the Stone Ages. So in my view, people were always doing science, meaning that they were always observing the world around us, the nearby world on Earth and also the skies. And we observe the world through our senses, through our eyes and ears and touch sensors. And there is another little world in our heads where we create a model of reality, a model of world, to be able to influence the future and cope with the problems. So, but looking at closer, it turns out that our eyes and our senses are not perfect scientific instruments. So we could not see a lot of things. So we needed to wait until the 19th or sometimes the 20th century until we could sense something that is in the world. Like we couldn't see the cells in our body before the invention of the microscope. We couldn't see the galaxies, the hundreds of millions of galaxies on the sky before invention of large telescopes. And also there are not only the optical modality, but there are other things like X-ray or radio waves or gravitational waves that cannot be observed without instruments. So for our senses, we need some kind of crutches, some kind of prosthesis to empower our senses to see modalities and see scales that are not available for the senses that were produced by the evolution. On the other side of the story, there's our brain, and humans are always very proud of the brain, and we think that this is one of the crown of creation. It is very complex and very powerful. But looking at the specifications that evolution gave us, we see that in certain parameters we lag way behind even current computers. And the goal of this machine, this human intelligence, was not to make a general intelligence. It was not to make something that can solve differential equations or matrix transformations. It was designed for living. It was designed to run away from the predators and give our genes for the next generation. So as our senses need crutches, our mind needs also crutches. And already the invention of writing and invention of books and printing, it was already some kind of extension, some kind of coprocessor. For example, even though I am a professor of physics at Eötvös University, I cannot multiply 10-digit numbers in my head. But if I got a piece of paper, I learned the long addition and long multiplication in school, so I can do that. So that's already some kind of extension for our minds. And actually invention of mathematics, that was a big invention. And this actually closed this so-called loop of understanding. So we observe the world, we sometimes make experiments, change various things and check whether things change in the environment. And also we have the model in our head on blackboards or in books or nowadays in computers. And from those, we can make predictions and we can validate whether our model is correct or not. And if it is not correct, then the loop goes over and over and we refine our models. So this is, in my view, this is the general loop of sciences, but also the general view of human intelligence. So the big data in sciences actually started way before the 21st century. Actually, one of the iconic example of sciences is the understanding of solar system, the Kepler's law that everyone learns in high school. So, but it is less well known that actually it took centuries of data collection from the ancient Greeks and Arabs uh, until Tycho Brahe, who was a rich Dane, and with this large instrument, he collected hundreds of positions of stars, and he did it over more than 2 decades. So it was a long data collection, and it is even less known that the data itself not enough to understand reality, the understand of the laws of nature, but it took another 30 years for Kepler to do this so-called data curation, as we now call it, and organize the data in a form that was able to be a basis of deciphering of the laws of Kepler's laws. You remember that actually Kepler law says that planets are moving around the sun in ellipses, but actually this can be considered just a fitting, a regression, like when we do some linear regression, because it is does not tell about anything. What is the cause of this motion? Why does a planet move around the sun in this shape of trajectory? And it took a couple of more decades until Isaac Newton uh, invented or realized what is the law, what is the mover behind these curves. And this is again something that you should very well know, the basic law of gravity and the basic law of forces as recovered by Newton. So actually there are these steps, or there are these layers: data, some kind of regression or effective model, and also at the end, this is the holy grail of sciences, to find something, a simple natural law that governs everything. And coming back to the 21st century, uh, all this loop is empowered by computers and microelectronic devices. So all the observations are going through digital instruments, and all the data already going into computers. A couple of decades ago, astronomers went out to the telescope and used their own eyes, or they used photo plates, which were old kind of chemical instruments to record the skies. But now all the telescopes are equipped with CCD cameras, and all the data are going into the computer. And on the other side, also data cannot be processed by humans because of the sheer volume of the data, and also because of the complexity. So I repeat that we were not designed for that. So the specification of human body and human mind was not for doing large-scale sciences. And there is a new possibility that these modern computers made possible, to actually solve the equations. Because in university, some of you may have learned, for example, differential equations, and uh, the teachers, the professors show you the simplest equations or the simplest differential equations in the classes. There are a little bit more complicated ones. They are the homeworks, and there are all the others that cannot be solved at all by analytic methods. But actually, we can use computers to solve these equations, these nonlinear differential equations that lies in most of the laws of nature, uh, and to do some kind of simulation, or I may call it virtual reality. And actually, virtual reality is a good analog, because actually the virtual reality that young guys like to kill zombies, that made possible actually that we scientists have such good computers. So the big population of users made possible this kind of rapid technology improvement. So at the end, in physics and in sciences, we have some kind of model which can be described by equations or by other means. And we have some kind of initial values, the parameters of the equation, the parameters of the model, and we can run these models, this virtual reality, and finally simulate a piece of reality, and we can compare that with large-scale observations. So this loop is now empowered very much by the modern technology. So actually, what made possible this technology? And it is very important to see that this is actually a loop. It is not just technology empower sciences, but also sciences at the first place made possible to create such a technology. So all this started, as I mentioned, with the curiosity of people to understand what are those shiny dots on the black sky. And from the understanding of the movement of planets in the solar system, because that is a pristine, a very clean system where there are only a very few bodies. There is no other problems. There is no noise. There are no other factors that we need to take care of. Only very few bodies, like two bodies with a large distance, almost point-like bodies, and only a single force is acting in between them. So that made possible to simplify a piece of reality and understand the laws of mechanics, and later on the laws of quantum mechanics, and based on quantum mechanics, the solid state physics, and build on the knowledge of solid state physics, we were able to create transistors, microelectronics, CPUs, and mobile phones. And this loop goes over and over, and it creates a huge improvement in the speed of computation and also in the amount of the data that is available for sciences. And I was lucky enough to be part of one of the very first really big data science project, which was the Sloan Digital Sky Survey, with the goal of creating the first 3D map of the universe. Because actually before 2000, we did not have such a map. So to do so, first we needed a telescope, of course. Telescopes were available for a long time, but actually this was the very first large digital camera that was used in astronomical telescopes. It was designed in the mid 90s, and actually you can see on the bottom left image the camera itself. So it is very much like a CCD camera that you have in your mobile phone, or actually you may have several cameras in your mobile phone. And it was a 120 megapixel color camera. And at that time, it was really huge, not just the size of the camera, that you can see that it cannot fit in a mobile phone, but also half of the megapixels that were available in the whole Earth, that those megapixels were in that single camera. And a couple of years later, now, mobile companies has already announced a camera in a mobile phone, fitted in a mobile phone with the same resolution. So this is actually more slow, and it is really interesting to see, even in my lifetime, that such a quick improvement happens. So finally, this camera working for 5 years, this took a huge image. So actually, the sky is very large. The universe is huge, and also the galaxies are very faint. So we need long exposures to get this image. But finally, we could take an image in 5 colors. So human eye sees in 3 colors. Actually, my one only in 2 because I am a colorblind. So this camera sees in 5 colors, and it created a 5-color image of 300 million galaxies, which altogether was a 2.5 terapixel image, which still huge, but I can imagine that in a couple of years, you may post your baby's picture in such a resolution on Facebook. There was a parallel other survey which was collecting spectra of galaxies. You may remember from the school that the white light can be stretched with a prism or other optical instruments along the wavelengths, and we can measure the intensity of the light. And the spectrum recovers a lot of things about galaxies. We can estimate the age of the galaxies. We can see the lines of chemical elements, and we can see the composition of galaxies from the spectra. And this is a huge information. And also through the expansion law of the universe, they provide information on the distance of objects, because from the photo, you cannot estimate the distance of the object. So at the end, we have a huge 2.5 terapixel image, and also we have 1 million 3,000 dimensions vectors of galaxy spectra. And this created a Moore's law in astronomy also. So in 1930, it was the time when we first discovered that we are not the only Milky Way, the only galaxy in the universe. So from that time until 1990, we could measure the position of around 1,000 galaxies. And now with the Sloan Digital Sky Survey in 2005, it went up to 1 million galaxies, and we have a large 3D map of the universe. Each little dot on this image is a galaxy. A galaxy contains billions of stars, and around each star, most probably there are planets, and there are conferences like this. So the universe is huge. But since the universe is huge, if you want to store its map, it requires a huge space. And around 2000, 10 terabytes was really huge. It was the time of CD disks, if you may remember, or older people may remember. And actually, it took a lot of time to develop the software, which were astronomers not used to. So finally, it produced data. And astronomers were used to handle images and handling individual galaxies and objects. And all of a sudden, in a couple of years, they got huge tables. Like one of our table was a 1 billion row table with 300 columns. And also we had this 1 million of 3,000 dimension vectors of spectra and the huge images. So, and it is general nowadays, not only in astronomy, that scientific observation result huge dimensional complex data sets. And this somewhat changed what is science about and what we do in our everyday scientific research. So there are the goals, the nice goals, the secrets of the universe, and particles and galaxies and so on. But in our daily work looks like this other image, that we almost blindly like to find the correct tool that would make accessible the data and the science, the goal, and we keep our eye on the greater goals, of course. So one example that a simple question is that we have these large images, and there are stars which are actually in our Milky Way, and there are galaxies which are far away, millions of light years away. And just by examining the space of colors, we may want to separate galaxies and stars. And actually, this is a complex, multidimensional geometric problem. And this required all of a sudden new skills for astronomers and also new technology. So just simply read through the raw data, it would took a day without any indexing. So astronomers all of a sudden should have learned database programming, computer geometry, indexing trees, multidimensional searches, indexing, and so on and so on. And this changed what many of the scientific fields are about. And this was just the Sloan Digital Sky Survey, which was designed in the late 90s and performed in the early 2000s. And now there are new surveys coming up that will collect the same amount of data that Sloan collected in 5 years. It will be collected in less than a week. And important point is sharing of the data, which alone creating a public cloud access for the data that itself requires special skills. And this is not just astronomy, but also other sciences like biology, genetics, that I get into contact recently, and also environmental sciences, social sciences. The slope is the same, and the basic questions are almost the same. So one other example is genetics or genomics. Everyone is familiar with the image of viruses. Actually, this is not SARS-CoV-2. This is 5X174, which was the first virus that was sequenced in 1977. Actually, it has a little bit more than 5,000 nucleotides, and we can read that sequences of A, T's, and G's and C's, which constitute the DNA or RNA inside living systems or viruses. But this process was done in a manual way, so it was a long process in the wet lab. And 30 years later, now this process can be miniaturized and put on a very little beads, and actually we can put several thousands or actually millions of beads on a single chip, which is very similar to the CC, this camera's chips or the CPU's chip, and we can improve or speed up this process very much like. And actually, there are also new devices like the Oxford Nanopore, which actually can put in a very small device, and actually this device is used daily, for example, sequencing SARS-CoV-2. And also we can put these devices in large rooms, and we can sequence thousands of genomes a day. And this created another Moore's law in genomics. And actually here, the continuous line is the Moore's law of improvement of computer technology. And the dots are the Moore's law, how the cost per genome decreases over the time. And actually you see that it is much faster, which means that people this that can store it. And it creates an exponential growth in amount of data. And this may open up new things like sequencing cancer genomes. And we now know that before the possibility of sequencing of human genomes, reading the 3 billion nucleotides of human genome, it was absolutely hopeless to answer the questions of cancer or cure cancer, because cancer is mostly about problems with genetics, errors in the genomes, mutations, and so on. And without having a telescope for that, without having eyes for that modality, it was absolutely hopeless to understand and cure cancer. And thousands of gene sequences and put it in public archives. And this is not the end of the story here. Also, there are lots of cells in the human body, and each may have a little bit different genomic composition. So the limit is the sky. But again, it is changed not only astronomy, but also biology in a way. And now biology is mostly about data sciences. Many parts of biology, actually. Information and this complexity into our minds. And I am not really hopeful that the same will happen that happened with astronomy and physics. And we probably will not have such a nice equation that can be put on a t-shirt with a couple of letters, like the laws of gravity and so on. But we may hope that there are some kind underlying lower dimensional thing that can be recovered, because if there is no such lower dimensional relation between the data, then it is absolutely hopeless to understand systems with millions of parameters. So complex models, complex data requires complex models, and all you know the simple thing that for restricting a linear function, 2 points are enough, but if you want to fit a parabola, then you need at least 3 points. And here is that where machine learning and artificial intelligence comes into the picture. So in the old way, we provided both the data and model to our computers that were able to do the predictions and the simulations. And the new paradigm is that we just provide the data, and the computer should in some way find out both the model and use that model for predictions. And important aspect or a key question here is how to transform the raw modality space that can be, for example, the pixels of an image for visual recognition into a more meaningful latent representation that is related to the categories or the real meaning of the objects. And many of the development in image recognition and some parts of artificial intelligence was about actually how to do this transformation from the raw modality space into a more meaningful latent representation space where similar things are clustered together. Actually, the roots of machine learning is very much common with physics. Actually, we do very similar things like optimizing for an energy surface, but our object or our agents are not neurons, rather small magnetic moments. And actually, this energy optimization and finding the global or deep minima of energy surfaces is very much similar. That's what we do with teaching of neural networks. And actually this kind of mechanism, actually this so-called spin lattice, is used in quantum computers, which is a great hope for machine learning also. And quickly, I just want to show very briefly some research topics that we do at the System of Complex Physics at Utrecht University. So we use machine learning to empower various disciplines, from genetics through medical imaging up to cosmology and quantum machine learning. And also we have master's and PhD courses at the university. So one example is very, very recent and very relevant, how to get rid of diseases, infectious diseases, and how to improve our monitoring. And many of the viruses and diseases are spread by so-called vectors, like COVID was originated from bats, as far as we know, and also there are lots of viruses and diseases like Zika and chikungunya that is spread by mosquitoes. And with Spanish colleagues who have a citizen science app, a mobile phone app that collects images of mosquitoes, we created a deep learning based method that separates the dangerous tiger mosquitoes from the other ones. And we are working on this project in a large European project. Also, we study coronaviruses, of course, and many of the sequences are done with nanopores, as I have shown. And the analysis of nanopore signals is again an interesting question for machine learning. Another project is about space weather. You may not know, but actually a a similar weather report is done for the space, because satellites can be very sensitive for solar storms, and we can use machine learning in that field also. And actually, there are several other fields like animal health, and we can mention many more. A big question that we are working also on to create training sets. So actually, we are in the world of big data, but actually still the bottleneck is usually a large curated data set, and together with the medical university, we create a large data set of pathology images to improve cancer diagnostics. One of our success story was the radiology, actually mammography, and as Reza mentioned yesterday, that Hinton had that talk that in 5 years you will need not have radiologists. Actually, this is not the case, but actually this system that was developed by one of my PhD students was the very first that was able to diagnose cancer from X-ray images at the same quality as radiologists do. And we are working on that to make it also an explainable AI, because actually this is a big question in several fields that we should trust in the models, and actually it is not impossible to get into the black box of neural networks and understand how they work. And at the end, because my time is up, I just want to come back to this loop of understanding and mention an interesting problem where we could actually learn something from machine learning. So usually we use machine learning to do something that we already know. And the question for scientists is whether can we learn something from machine learning, or can machine learning discover something new? And there's an interesting example. So we try to estimate cosmological parameters, which is actually from gravitational lensing maps. So we can simulate the process, as I've told you. So if we have the initial parameters, we have the differential equations, we can actually simulate the large-scale structure of the universe, and we can simulate the observations. But this is the simulation, okay? But the other way is way more hard. So starting from the observation to infer back the physical processes and the cosmological parameters, it's a hard inverse problem, but actually neural networks come handy to solve this problem. And this was a great success. We could publish it Nature Astronomy, which is very good. And we had a large neural network with 2 million parameters that actually work better than any previous method that cosmologists can come up with. But the interesting thing is that when we try to do this explainable AI and look into the inside of the neural networks with some clever methods, like this layer-wise relevance propagation method, we could actually identify what the neural network is looking at when it is doing the predictions. And it turned out that while cosmologists are using various Fourier techniques because they taught to do so, neural net uses some kind of simple things like the profiles of the distribution of material, halo profiles. And also it turned out that a single convolutional kernel, or actually even a simpler one, this so-called Robert Cross kernel, which is just a 2x2 matrix, a 2x2 convolutional kernel, actually itself, the single cell was almost as good as the whole neural network with 2 million parameters. And actually, cosmologists could have designed that decades before, but actually because their short-sightedness in some sense, they were focusing on more fancy methods like Fourier transformation and such, and they could not discover this. So finally, as a last slide, I wanted to put something optimistic here. So this is a quote from Arthur C. Clarke, that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And actually, I remind you these thing that actually it was human curiosity to finding out what are those tiny little bright dots on the sky that started this whole process that ended in online conferences that we do now. So actually understanding the laws of mechanics that made possible to build the pyramids and cathedrals. Actually understanding the laws of thermodynamics that made possible to create the steam engine and internal combustion engine. And now we have magical things like 7-league boots in our garages. Also understanding the electrodynamics and quantum mechanics that made possible online conferences and mobile phones. And now there is another frontier, life and intelligence, and the question that what miracles and what kind of challenges will that bring. And the final thought, because I am at university, it is very, very important to have new kind of researchers and new kind of students for this new kind of sciences. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, István. So we are very happy to have you here, and I am very happy that we managed to re-establish the connectivity. Whatever issue there has been resolved. So I hope you also enjoyed the presentation, dear audience. And now we are running a little bit out of time, but there is still time for one question. So I will select the only question that was put on the chat. And actually that is about the brain-machine interface. So one of our readers asks us, when you say we are augmenting our skills, we are not able to detect this or that. But do you believe in brain-machine interface and probably moving in that direction and augmenting the human that way?
I wouldn't say that I believe in that, but I think that it is unavoidable. And actually, I think it's already happened. So I already cannot live without this brain-machine interface that is my computer or my mobile phone. And I think that most of us like this. So we use the GPS. So actually, when I was a student, I learned Fortran programming. Later, I learned C and C++, and now I use Python, but I have never learned that. So I still look up the basic commands and basic things on the net. So I do not take the time to learn. So actually, I already merged together with computers and machines. So I think this is already happening, and we cannot avoid that.